StudyIQ IAS, आपका सिलेक्शन हमारा मिशन.
In the previous class, we looked at 6 unique developments that happened over the course of evolution, which made us the humans that we are today, biologically, right? That was the thing that we emphasized upon. First one among them was, of course, your bipedalism. Second is non-honing chewing complex. Third was development of hyoid bone. Next one, tool making. Hunting, and it is next one is basically agriculture. Now see, there were so many other subsequent developments that happened, but primarily these were 4 or 5 very important developments that took place, which eventually helped us in understanding the course of evolution. कर सकते हैं, कोई दिक्कत नहीं. नॉमेनक्लेचर में, बायोलॉजिकल में नहीं, यहाँ पे कोई दिक्कत नहीं. You don't have to be that technical here. You can simply write H habilis or Homo habilis, no problem. It doesn't work that way here, right? So when we look at these developments, we actually see that one of the most important development was basically what? The idea of bipedalism. And we are going to encounter all of these ideas again and again when we are going to subsequently study. Next important thing that we have to study, which we have to start from today, is the idea of evolution. Right? And we can call it the biological evolution, right? Now, like I told you in some of the previous classes, that when we study the idea of biological evolution earlier, the whole of idea about the present world was based on Bible, or we call it biblical thought. It was known from the biblical thought, wherein it was believed that God has created us, and this theory was called as creationism, right? And there was what? Something called as a grand design, which the God has created. When God has created something, definitely things are going to be static. They will not change. The idea is what? The idea is things that have been created by God, He has created once and for all. And He has, the things that have been created by God once, they are never going to change. वो कभी change होगी क्या? वो change नहीं होंगी. It is an assumption. When God has created something, definitely He would have things very clear in His mind. We assume and presume that there is clarity. We assume that there was clarity in the mind of the God, and once He created the things in such a fashion. He made humans the intelligent species. So this was an idea which was based and embedded in religion. But problem is, anthropology is what? It is the scientific study of man. Anthropology is basically what? The scientific study of the man. And if anthropology is the scientific study of the man, we'll have to scientifically verify if this is true. And when you scientifically try to verify, it does not come out to be true. When you scientifically try to verify, it does not come out to be true, right? There were simultaneously multiple developments that were happening. Simultaneously, in the field of knowledge, there were so many developments that were happening, which eventually culminated into the theory of evolution provided by Darwin. Multiple fields were developing in that time period, multiple ideas were developing, and they actually helped us. It also made Darwin believe that actually all of us have evolved from the previously existing species on this planet, which have largely become extinct today. It made us believe that actually the life on the earth has started from a unicellular organism. Life on the planet earth has started from a unicellular organism, and which is what has made it possible for us to understand what we have today. So basically what happened is Darwin challenged the traditional ideas. Earlier in subsequent fields, certain developments were happening which challenged the biblical ideas. For example, earlier Bible used to believe, or people religious people used to believe that earth is flat and it is not round. But only after a point of time we started believing that the earth is round and our earth is round, it is not flat. Right? Bible gave us a very different time period. Bible gave us a very different time period for the origin of the earth. But scientifically it was found that it is far more older. It is not as old as it has been provided by Bible. Right? And even the chronology sometimes is very different in different religions. Different religions have different ideas about how the world was created and how the diversity was created. Right? So some of these developments, if you see, one of the developments was the overall idea of change and evolution that was happening. If you look at this term evolution, what exactly does it mean? Simply evolution means what? Things do not remain the same. They keep on changing. They evolve. One of the idea that is embedded in the notion of evolution is the idea of something we call as change, or something we call as development. Evolution word का मतलब क्या हुआ? If we try to understand the meaning of the word evolution, it means what? Yes, it evolved with time. Gradual change. No, just leave aside any genetic characteristics or anything like that. Just see the meaning of the term evolution. When you say that I am an evolved person now, means I am a changed person now. I am a better off person now as compared to what I was previously. So now things have evolved in case of India after independence. Politics in India has evolved since independence. So it simply refers to the idea of what? Change or development. Change or development or progressive change. Why exactly did Europeans start believing in this idea of evolution? Why did they start believing in this idea of evolution? Was because the European society was itself making a lot of progress. European society was making progress. Why? Because they thought that now they have become scientific, they have capitalism, they have industrial evolution. Definitely things are changing and improving. Well, what did Bible say? Bible said that things degenerate. Things degenerate. Just for example, if you look at things from religious perspective, religion would say that best has already happened and now things are degrading. And most of the people and their thoughts are actually influenced by these ideas. आज भी लोगों को देखो तो जैसे हमारी जनरेशन में लोग हम सुनते हैं कि यार सब कुछ खराब हो रहा है, कुछ ठीक नहीं है, सरकार सही नहीं काम कर रही है, बहुत घटिया टाइम में हम पैदा हो गए हैं, है ना? कि इस टाइम पे मेरे ही टाइम पे ये होना था क्या, कोविड आया तो फिर उसके बाद एआई आ गया, मेरा पूरा जीवन बर्बाद कर दिया. बट एक्चुअली इफ यू लुक एट इट, वी आर इन अ बेटर position right now as compared to what we were 100 years back. The world overall has become a better place to live as compared to what it used to be. 100 साल पहले, or almost like 80 years before, the world was fighting a world war. There were diseases for which there was no treatment. Yes or no? Science only made it possible for us to do this thing. So religion always says what? Things were best in the past. Now they are degrading. You just see the case of India. हम आज परेशान तो बहुत हैं, लेकिन if you look at the India of 1947, it was far worse than what it is today. है बात की नहीं? Right or wrong? Life expectancy was 35 years age. Literacy was low. Poverty, unemployment, all sorts of problems were there. We agree that today also we have certain problems, but those problems are far better as compared to what they used to be in the previous times. And I'm saying not everybody has benefited from this growth story. That is also true. But even then, they are better off as compared to their previous generations. At least we have the availability of food today, which was also a big problem before 1960s when we had Green Revolution. So on an average, we see what? Things have changed and improved. And this was a thought that was being witnessed by certain people. So the people who believed in religion, they thought what? Things are degenerating. It is called as degenerationism. It was called as what? Degenerationism. While the people who believed in progress, it was called as what? Progressivism. Progressivism. It was called as progressivism. Right? And one of the staunch proponents of progressivism was Herbert Spencer, who talked about something called as social evolution. And what was the mechanism for social evolution that he provided? He said that the mechanism of social evolution is basically what? Is basically competition for scarce resources. And due to this, what we find today as the consequence of progress is the idea of what? Survival of the fittest. It is called as what? Survival of the fittest. There is assumption in the idea of evolution that to achieve progress, some sort of destruction is important. मानोगे इस बात को? The assumption in the idea of evolution, progress, and development is that you will need to have witnessed some sort of destruction, without which progress and development cannot be made. For example, AI technology is coming up. People are fearing that they are going to lose jobs. And how the people who focus upon the progress project it, they say that it is inevitable and necessary, in fact, for the mankind. We know there will be a short-term pain, but in the long run, things are going to improve. Do you all agree? Yes or no? Do you think when for the first time the steam engine would have started and machines would have started to replace the manual labor, would people have accepted it easily? No. क्या लोगों ने इसको आसानी से accept किया होगा? नहीं. It was not that easy. People didn't accept it willingly. Yes, when computers were being introduced, the government departments would have been very skeptical that we are not going to use this and what is this machine and we are doing it very well, we are keeping the books and what's the problem, everything like that would have been talked about. But eventually we know it had to be accepted and it's a clear sign of progress. Right? Competition means what? Competition means not everyone is going to thrive. There will be some losses, there will be some destruction. Yeah? So in fact, they justify disruption sometimes. They justify the destruction sometimes. Right? And competition is seen to be one of the forces behind. Yeah, they don't want online entry of the commodities, definitely in post office. So what we see here is that evolution assumes that there is survival of the fittest as an idea. That resources are always scarce and there is always a competition for those resources. And only the best are going to survive. Who will be the best people? Who possess certain characteristics, who are ready to change with time, who are ready to adapt to the new circumstances. Who are ready to adapt to the new and changing circumstances. Only those individuals will be able to survive. So what we got to understand is humans' ability to survive is dependent upon their ability to adapt and be flexible. A rigid person will never be able to survive, even in general discussions if you see. Right? For example, we are living in, let's say, the 21st century, but somebody still carries the ideas of the 19th century. No, I'm not going to do that. He's not going to survive. Survival requires adaptation. Right? So this might have given some idea to Darwin. In fact, Darwin was impressed by this term survival of the fittest and he used and borrowed this term of survival of the fittest from Herbert Spencer's ideas. Along with that, I told you one of the problems with the religious idea was it was projecting as if everything is static, it is unchanging, which was challenged by people who were paleontologists because they highlighted that things have never remained the same. Actually, some species have become extinct. If you look at surface of Earth has also not remained the same. It has also kept on changing and transforming and evolving. For example, if you see the mountain ranges around yourself, Himalayas have actually evolved in the recent times only. There were no Himalayas 30 million years back. And that's why we call them as what? The young fold mountains. So dynamism in the surface of the Earth was one of the features that was understood. Idea that species go extinct, that also intrigued people. Right? At the same time, the ideas like survival of the fittest, like Malthusian theory of how population growth and resource growth have a correlation. Where he highlighted that eventually the population will grow only to the extent to which the resources are available. Yes or no? So all of these developments before Darwin highlighted what? All of these developments before Darwin actually highlighted that things have never remained the same. Rather, they have kept on changing. Rather, they have kept on transforming. Rather, they have kept on evolving. And it is something that is going to be inevitable. But when it was about biological evolution, people were not ready to accept this thing. Why? Because they thought that living beings are a creation of God. For example, when the colonial people started colonizing Africa, Asia, and America, when they saw flora and fauna which was very different from the flora and fauna that was mentioned in the Bible, they could not accept it. All they did was what? Just to arrange it into a taxonomy and assume that it is going to remain the same. Assume that it is static. Carl Linnaeus, who was the first person to make this taxonomy, give this nomenclature, actually claimed what? He claimed that my job is just to document the flora and fauna, find out the similarities and differences, and arrange them into a hierarchical level. But I'm not going to tell if they have evolved or not. Why? Because he said that God has created, my job is just to arrange them scientifically, just to give them a scientific nomenclature. But later, there was a person named Lamarck. He gave his ideas. In his ideas, he actually talked about evolution, but his explanation to the evolution was not that convincing. His explanation for the mechanism of evolution was not that convincing. And that actually created a lot of problems. That's why his idea was not accepted. But we still read him because we give him credit for introducing this idea of evolution, who challenged this notion that human beings or all the beings on this planet are static. Right? He highlighted that actually the evolution happens because of internal desire of the organisms. Kya bola usne? Evolution happens because of internal desire of the organisms. And use and disuse of the organs will lead to their evolution. Use and disuse of the organs of the individuals, it will lead to what? It is going to lead to what? Evolution. Or even if it is not being used properly, eventually it is going to be lost. In support of his argument, he highlighted that actually, if you see the giraffe's neck increased in size as a result of what? Giraffe's neck size increased because the vegetation grew taller. And giraffe did not have much vegetation available on the ground. And that is why he had a desire to get the food. He kept stretching his neck. And eventually by stretching his neck, he could get the leaves. Right? And then he said what? Once this characteristic was acquired, he gave the idea that there is inheritance of these acquired characters. What did he say? Use and disuse, internal desire leads to what? Inheritance of these acquired characters. जैसे for example, मैंने एक बार जिम करके बॉडी बना ली because I'm using my hand. So my child will be born with a 6-pack abs. उसको एक्सरसाइज करने की जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ेगी. सही तो लग रहा है? हाँ. हाँ, तो होता ही है ना. Why? Because the mechanism is very different. Mechanism of evolution was wrongly interpreted. है नहीं. जैसे मान लो कि मेरा किसी रोड एक्सीडेंट में हाथ कट जाए, तो क्या मेरे बच्चे के हाथ नहीं होंगे? Acquired character है ना. And if it can be inherited, if this is so, this is how it should be. Getting my point? किसी के बाल उड़ गए, तो क्या अगली जनरेशन बाल नहीं होंगे सबके? Right? And why do we give him credit? We give him credit because at least he thought about it. See, most of the early theories have been discarded. Even if you look at the classical evolutionism provided by E.B. Tylor, we say that their approach was wrong. It was ethnocentric. But highlighting that cultures evolve and societies change, it was not wrong to say. Yes or no? We can always say that thing or not? Yes, people online. I hope it is making sense. ठीक है? New people. क्या चीज? हाँ, लिम्स खत्म हो गए उनके, इतना रेंग रेंग के चलते थे। कुछ भी करो तुम, जो सोचना चाहते हो सोच लो, जिस भी तरह से तुम करना चाहते हो, यू विल बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस थिंग। द होल पॉइंट इज, अरे नाराज क्या हो रहे हो? सबका ध्यान, सबका साथ, सबका विकास। ठीक है, fair enough. So what we see here is that the idea of static, idea that the world is static, idea that the world has been created once and it has remained the same, was challenged. Why it was challenged? Because of all the developments that were happening in different fields. All of these developments actually coalesced into this eventual theory of evolution provided by Charles Darwin. Into the theory of evolution provided by Charles Darwin. Now let us open the, I forgot to tell him about the printouts. Did you get the printouts? Anyways, just follow things with me here. People online, I hope you have the handout. Just reshare it again if somebody does not have it. Is it visible to everybody? I hope this is visible to everyone. Okay. Now see, physical anthropology has two principal aspects of study, right? And I already told you the controversy regarding the usage of the term physical and biological anthropology. We use it on a day-to-day basis interchangeably, but if you look at the origin of these terms, physical basically has a racist origin. But even today we use it very simply. Just for example, the term that was used by E.B. Tyler to refer to the tribal cultures was primitive culture. His work itself was called as what? Primitive Culture 1871. Franz Boas challenged that thing, but even today, sometimes casually we use the term primitive for them. Savages sometimes is a term that is used. Okay? For example, for caste system, there are three terms. Caste, which is an external term that has been given by the colonial people. There is Varna and there is Jati. Interchangeably, these terms are used in day-to-day usage. Right? First is to study the human evolution. And second is what? To study the human variations. Why? Because anthropology is the study of what? Biological as well as what? Cultural features, and both in time and space. Meaning how things have happened in the past and how they are in the present. Right? Even in the past, what kind of variations were there? Even in the past, what kind of variations were there? Right? Human evolution is the evolution of what? Homo sapiens from their ancestors. And human variation is what? Both cultural and biological differences that exist among the individual populations. For example, if you look at the variations in the present times, you will find what? Not all the humans look the same. जैसे ऑफलाइन क्लास में पहले बोलते थे बातें मत करो, यहाँ ऑनलाइन में बोलना पड़ रहा है बातें मत करो. This is a strange phenomena that I'm seeing. Just drop me a message, new people. I'll add you to the group. Just drop me a WhatsApp message on this number. Okay, and I'll share it. Just drop me that. I'll add you to the group later. New people who join, just drop me a message. I'll add you to the group. Just keep following what I'm showing you on the screen right now. Okay, Yash? Anyways, come back. So when you look at the human beings, although we have evolved from the past and we have become the humans that we are today, We have become the Homo sapiens species. But are we all the same? No, we still have variations. Different skin colors, different kind of heights, different kind of shape of your eyes or your hair. And we simply are not just interested in these differences. We are not correlating these differences to any of the idea of cultural superiority or inferiority or intelligence. No. We are interested in this idea that how do we have or why do we have these variations in the first place? What is the mechanism that leads to these variations? किस mechanism की वजह से ये variations आते हैं? Getting my point? Yes or no? What did the British do wrong or what did the colonial people do wrong? They simply looked at the physical features without knowing why these physical features are different in different people. They just presume that if people have white skin, they are superior. If people have dark skin, they are inferior. There was a problem in that kind of notion. ठीक बात है कि नहीं? Yes, no? Right? So you will see that there is a chapter on different adaptations and variations in the human beings. There is, I think, chapter number 9 mein there are subparts where you read about these variations. ठीक है? Then when we look at the definitions of evolution, Herbert Spencer coined the term evolution. I told you, right? Herbert Spencer talked about the idea of progressivism. Herbert Spencer told about what? The idea of evolution. So I told you progressivism. Progressivism was opposed to what? Degenerationism of Bible. Degenerationism of Bible. It was opposed to that, right? Then you see, the term organic evolution is applied to the changes that have taken place in the living things, right? Living things are plants and animals. Living things are plants and animals. And I told you, if you look at the living beings, we can always do what? We can divide all of the living beings on the basis of, or into two major groups. One are the plants, another one are the animals. Why plants? Plants are autotrophs. They produce their own food. Why animals? Animals are the ones which do not produce their own food. They actually do what? They rely on the food produced by the plants, or they rely on the animals which eat those plants. Right? Because the plants can produce their own food, they don't have to move. Because the plants don't have to rely on someone else's food. They are static. They remain at the same place. But animals, if they have to get food, they will have to move around. How they move is actually very important in understanding how they actually get their food. Bipedalism, quadrupedalism, all of these things are what? That is why we study the strategy of locomotion. If you don't move around, you will not get food. है नहीं है? Zomato, Swiggy तो बहुत आज के डेवलपमेंट्स हैं कि यहाँ से ऑर्डर किया कि जाके प्लांट से थोड़ा सा गैदरिंग करके आ जाना भाई मेरे बिहाफ पे. नॉट पॉसिबल है कि आपने ब्लिंकिट वाले को बोला जाके हिरण मार के ले आना भाई मेरे को खाना है आज. नॉट पॉसिबल. ब्लिंकिट को बताओ ऐसी सर्विस है तो वो चालू भी कर देगा. गेटिंग माय पॉइंट? यस, ऑनलाइन आ रही बात समझ में? हाँ, इसलिए हमारा लोकोमोशन कम हो गया है, लेकिन हम इतने साल तक लोकोमोशन ही करते आ रहे थे चलने के लिए. सो वी अगेन नीड टू मूव अराउंड. दैट इज व्हाई यू सी एवरी टाइम देयर इज अ discussion that goes on ki move 10,000 steps. Why 10,000 steps? Because on an average, a person living in the savannas who would be doing hunting and gathering would walk like that. If you really got to stay fit, unlike me, You got to do what? You got to walk daily, one, and few times in a week you need to sprint. That's it. Few times. Even a hunter-gatherer would do that. On a daily basis, he would conserve his energy, just walk slowly, do gathering. But when he sees an animal and that has to be killed, he would run quickly. Yes or no? And that was supposedly one of the important things that helped the hunter-gatherers. It is something that was a consequence of their evolution. Plus, they ate diverse foods. When eating non-vegetarian, they got the proteins and the fats. When eating the plant-based food, they got a lot of important nutrients which were required. Today, we are eating only one type of nutrition: carbohydrates, carbohydrates, carbohydrates. So most of the modern health is based on these ideas only. All the nutritionists, everyone actually is talking about this thing only. Reduce the carbs, increase the protein. Where does it come from? It comes from here. Anyone? Walk daily, keep moving, don't keep sitting. Don't lead a sedentary life. Why? Because it has been part of our evolution. Evolutionally, we are adapted to this thing. Right? Like yesterday, I made a video on why young children are having specs. Because most of the times what happens is we keep watching the screens right from the childhood. And the point is, during the developmental phase of the children, when they're actually growing up, if they will keep seeing things at a very closer range, it is going to have what? A long-term issue on their eyes. And we are designed for what? We are designed for seeing far distances. Going into the sun, seeing things at far off places. So our eyes have adapted to that thing. But when you're seeing things closer, you're actually putting a lot of stress. And this leads to permanent muscle damage. So evolutionarily, these things are not fit. Right? So we got to continue things that we were doing in the past, even if we want to do the things that we are doing today. हमें वो भी करना पड़ेगा, साथ साथ जो हम आज कर रहे हैं ये भी कर सकते हैं. I'm not saying that just stop living a modern life. No doubt about it. You live a modern life, no problem in that. But the point is, do those things which have actually been part of our evolutionary process. Anyways, Charles Darwin defined evolution as what? Descent with modification. That is closely related species. Very important. Closely related species resembling one another because of their inheritance and differing from one another because of the hereditary differences accumulated during the separation of their ancestors. Simply, when he says what? That from one particular ancestral species, different species have emerged, like humans and chimpanzees broadly. Let's forget there were any intermediate species. And let's assume there was only one common ancestor from which one branch led to the modern humans and one branch led to the chimpanzees. So it is what? Accumulation of certain kinds of traits which led to what? The evolution of a new species. Like I told you, the mechanism of natural selection, what did we highlight? In mechanism of natural selection, we highlight that a population has variations. Right? Some of those variations will be what? Adaptive, some of them will be maladaptive. And over generations, what is going to increase? The frequency of adaptive variations is going to increase, while the frequency of maladaptive is going to decrease. Meaning what? Differing from one another because of the hereditary differences accumulated during the separation of their ancestors. In the subsequent generations, you're going to find what? You're going to find certain people. For example, let's say this is one of the species. Let's say a particular population has variations A and B. There are, let's say, 50 individuals with this A. Just a very simplistic, although at a very small population level, it does not happen this way. And there are 50 individuals with B characteristics. And somehow, we're not assuming any one of them is adaptive or maladaptive. They enter into a new environment. And they enter into a new environment. or a mix of population. For example, there are 45A and there are 5B, or there are 45B and 5A. They enter into this new environment. So over a period of time, the frequency of the population having B will increase considerably. And let's assume that B is an adaptive trait here. Here the population of what? A will increase. And enough time passes, because they are living in different environments, new variations are going to emerge. And the features that these populations have will be very different from the population of this group. And you have seen the origin of the species. Already you have witnessed what? The origin of the species or not? So how exactly do we express it? Closely related species resembling one another, or they resemble one another because of their inheritance and differ from one another because of hereditary differences. Hereditary meaning those differences that they have inherited, right? Accumulated during the separation of their ancestors. Broadly, the mechanism is natural selection. Dodson and Dodson highlight that evolution is the process by which related populations diverge from one another, giving rise to new species. This is what we have been discussing. Very simplistic, very easily understandable. Learn one of them. Learn the Dodson and Dodson, right? Then Dobzhansky stated that evolution is the development of dissimilarities between ancestral and descendant population. Getting or not? Simple, eh? Right? Yes, no? Yes, right, guys? Now we got to see certain developments that happened before Darwin's theory. And I've been telling about those in the last 3-4 classes. Which were the developments that happened before Darwin gave his theory of evolution? And actually, Darwin was inspired by many of the previously existing ideas. You see, a good thing about the human beings and their knowledge is that most of the ideas that you see are developed from the previously existing ideas. Not necessarily some of these ideas are original ideas. They have developed over the previously existing ideas. They have developed from the previously existing ideas. They have not come out of nowhere. And this you'll get to know when you study the theories part. Right? For example, when Herbert Spencer gave the idea of survival of the fittest, it was a new thought that he might have given. Darwin borrowed from that idea. In fact, when Herbert Spencer was giving the idea that things change, even before Herbert Spencer, there was Auguste Comte who highlighted that body of knowledge evolves. Everyone was talking about evolution. Evolution was a talking point. From theological to metaphysical to positivism. ठीक है? Yes, no? आ रही कहानी समझ में? Right? Which are these developments? Let's see this. Charles Darwin first represented his theory of evolution in his book. Name of the book is very important. Always remember this. Origin of Species, 1859. Year is important. Based on years of personal observations and of study, this unifying biological theory drew on 1. Geology, 2. Paleontology, 3. Taxonomy, and systematics and demography. Systematics and demography. He actually borrowed from all these fields. Right? When we look at some of these theories, first is James Hutton. What did he do? Calculated the Earth's age. We'll see once again, come back to this. Let's quickly look at the ideas, how they have evolved. First, I told you the people who actually gave the ideas without any scientific basis, they were great thinkers. Aristotle talked about how humans were created. Herodotus talked about the idea that how humans were created. Right? What did Aristotle say? He believed in all forms of living life give rise to new forms. He believed in the idea that old forms of life give rise to new forms, but it was not accepted. Herodotus, there are traces of the concept of adaptation. Plants evolving before animals, indicating gradual evolution of higher organisms and finally man. तो देखो जितने भी पुराने टेक्स्ट होते हैं, हमारे भी अगर एंशिएंट टेक्स्ट देखेंगे उनमें कुछ ना कुछ ऐसा मिल जाएगा. If you look at our ancient texts also, they might have some knowledge, because we should not deny the fact that they were also trying to understand how things have been created. They were not unintelligent people. They were observant. They saw things. And they wanted to observe how things are actually operating. Although they were not able to explain it so scientifically, but at least they were making efforts. Otherwise, why would have they written such huge texts like Rig Veda, like Ayurveda? Why did they write such texts? Because they at least tried to find out some solution. Depending upon the body of knowledge at that point of time, they developed their ideas. If we see them from today's lens, definitely they will sound very meaningless. Yes, no? Right, for example, Ayurveda would tell you that don't eat dahi at night. It's scientifically invalid. There's no restriction on eating curd at night, scientifically. But Ayurveda says this so. They might have observed something in that time, and that might have been problematic. So maybe they incorporated this idea. They had developed their logic on the basis of some of the observations that they made in those times. Today, that has been challenged and questioned. This is how humanity works. Even science did not know a few things 100 years back, but it knows it today. So they have accepted this thing. Hayana? For example, for a long period of time, it was believed that light is only wave. But then later, they accepted that it also has particles, and that is why we have particle theory and wave theory of light. So even science improves. So it was their understanding. It is our understanding of the present time. It is definitely better off as compared to the previous one. Even science does not know so many questions today, but still working in that direction, right? So the great thinkers, they kept thinking about, why do we call them great thinkers? These are ancient thinkers. They have been given credit of thinking about those things even in the ancient times. That is why they are considered great thinkers. Okay? Then medieval theories. Medieval was a period which is known for what? Which is known as Dark Ages. Why Dark Ages? Because this was a period when religion's influence was extreme on the European society. Most of the developments that happened in anthropology, and especially Darwin's theory, all of these developments were happening in European society. We had nothing to do with it. Getting my point? So it was a society which was what? Fully influenced by religion. And to counter this, only Renaissance came, where people started to read what? Ancient Greco-Roman texts, where they would have found mentions of what? Aristotle and Plato and Herodotus and all of these people. And they found out that in that society, the influence of religion was not that great. Religion existed, but religion did not dominate. Yes or no? Right? Do you all agree? Online ballots. Yes. See, these are mythical stories. Most of the religious texts are stories. They have been narrated in the form of a story. At times there will be exaggerations, but there will be some truth in that. Right? So medieval period was a more orthodox period. So what do you find here? Theory of special creation. That all living beings came into existence in the unchanging form due to divine will. है। और एक दिन भगवान उठे, उन्होंने लगा दुनिया बना देता हूं यार, बना दी दुनिया। हम आ गए गलती से, यहाँ होता है। इस गाना भी आता है ना, दुनिया बनाने वाले क्या तेरे मन में समाई, तूने काहे को दुनिया बनाई, निराश होकर। कितनी मुश्किल दुनिया बनाई, नर्सरी पढ़ो, फिर 12वीं तक जाओ, फिर शेट कहां कहां तक बस करते ही रहो कुछ ना कुछ। Right? It is a special creation theory that God has created. It is divine will through which they have created. See, in most of the times you see, the gods also reflect the nature of the society. कैसे gods होंगे वो? सोसाइटी के नेचर को रिफ्लेक्ट करता है, सोसाइटी कैसी है। We have a chapter on religion, we'll study there. वहां पे यही बताता है वो। ठीक है। Now see, next is Carl Linnaeus. What did Carl Linnaeus do? He basically provided us with the first taxonomy, first acceptable taxonomy of the living beings of both flora and fauna. Right? What did he say? The acceptance of biological evolution of organism had crept into the scientific world by mid-18th century with Carl Linnaeus, a Swedish botanist. It was Linnaeus who designated each living species two Latin names, binary nomenclature, one for genus, other for the species. Carl Linnaeus gave each plant and animal a higher level genus, plural genera, name, and a lower level species. A single genus could include one or more species. For example, when Linnaeus named human beings Homo sapiens, Homo being the genus and sapiens being the species. However, Linnaeus was committed to the notion that life forms were static and fixed at the time of the creation. उसके टाइम पे बात होने लगी थी कि कुछ कुछ चीजें चेंज हो रही थी, and people say that he incorporated that idea also in his taxonomy, but he could not openly accept it. It was difficult to accept things in that time. It was actually difficult to accept it in the open. Galileo was put into jail for saying that the earth is round. It is the earth which revolves around the sun, not the other way around. लोग ऐसे कैसे बोल सकता है? In fact, when Darwin published his theory and said that humans have evolved from ape-like ancestors, the religious people mocked him, and they said that maybe your grandfather might have been ape, but ours was not. तेरे दादाजी होंगे बंदर, हमारे नहीं है। है नहीं है। ठीक है। So now see, what did he believe? He was committed to the notion that life forms were static and fixed at the time of the creation. In his later editions of his book, he hinted at the possibility of some species may be related to each other because of common descent, but he never developed these ideas. उसको हल्का हल्का लग तो रहा था, लेकिन अब बोले कैसे? जैसे कई बार होता है ना, जब बाद में वो बात प्रूव हो जाती है, लगता है मैंने तो पहले ही बोला था। I knew it from the beginning, but I was reluctant to say this thing. Right? What kind of taxonomy did he give? So you can see it here. Kingdom, phylum, subphylum, class, order, suborder, superfamily, family, subfamily, genus, and species. Right? When I told you that the whole taxonomy was created on the basis of what? Certain broad similarities and certain differences which are there. So every level that you see here is on the basis of this only. First, if you look at the kingdom, animal and plant kingdom. We are study of man, we are not concerned with plants. Anthropology is the study of man, anthropos and logos. So if it is the study of the man, we are not even interested in plant kingdom. We are only interested in animal kingdom. Even within the animal kingdom, we are interested in one particular part of the animal kingdom. है? जैसे होता है ना कि बायो है सर, एंथ्रो में कैसे पढ़ना है, इतनी बायो है। We actually make use of certain other subjects to build our story, right? For example, humans are animals because we do not make our own food but depend upon intake of living food. Yes, Dr. Saab. Is it visible? दिख रहा है? हाँ? ठीक है? Then if you see, let's for example, you see vertebrates. Humans are vertebrates possessing an internal backbone and a segmental spinal column. महिमा भी देखेंगे नियो डार्विनिज्म वगैरह. थोड़ा सा क्या है कि सब बराबर लेवल पे नहीं है. आई नो यू आर अ डॉक्टर, तो तुम थोड़ा ज्यादा पता होगा. नहीं, उत्सुकता होती है, वैलिडेशन मिलता है. जैसे देखो, जब यूपीएससी तैयारी करने आते हैं, इंजीनियर्स आते हैं जब तैयारी करने, तो उनको बिल्कुल हवा नहीं लग रही होती है. हिस्ट्री में क्या चल रहा है, इकोनॉमी क्या बोल रहे हैं, पॉलिटी में क्या हो गया, ये थियरी क्या बोल रही है. फिर एक दिन आता साइंस टेक वाला चैप्टर, लगता है ओ माय गॉड, थोड़ा बहुत तो कुछ आता है, पढ़ेंगे इसको आगे. और फिर उसमें वो बढ़ चढ़ के पार्टिसिपेट करते हैं. फिर आता सी सेट, उनको लगता है ये मैं कर लूंगा. होता है ना ऐसा. मतलब डोंट टेक इट अदरवाइज, बट दिस इज हाउ इट वर्क्स. होता है एक्साइटमेंट, नॉर्मल, नेचुरल है. और इसका मैं एक फायदा बता देता हूं क्या है. इसका फायदा क्या है कि when somebody already knows and attends the class, he is actually better off understanding these things. So what is my recommendation? How you can do it? You come reading into the class. All of you, if you come reading in the class, I can bet तुम एक बोरी चावल खा के जाओ तो भी नींद नहीं आएगी, क्योंकि तुम्हें इंटरेस्ट आने लगेगा खुद ही. इंसान बहुत सेल्फिश क्रीचर है. उसने अगर इन्वेस्ट किया टाइम 1 घंटा पढ़ने में, वो आके सर की पूरी जान खाएगा. सर ये बताओ क्या है, ये तो पता नहीं, ये तो बताया नहीं आपने. Yes, anybody who comes reading into the class actually will always be excited, will be participative. डोसाइल क्या होता है, जब पढ़ के नहीं आए, इतना बर्डन है, वो हार चुके हैं जीवन से ऑलरेडी. That's why I share this beforehand, so that you keep reading this, and for 3-4 days I just build the momentum so that you take time to read this from here, from Amber and Amber. Because I'm telling you, after this class is over, you'll never go and read the books again. Just do it once and you feel the difference in the next class. है ना? Pre-reading is like the most important thing. बहुत सारे टीचर क्या करते हैं, देते नहीं कि अरे मैं दे दूंगा फिर मेरी क्लास में नहीं आएंगे. मत आओ भैया, समझ में आ गया तो आने की जरूरत ही क्या है. 5 लोग आएंगे, उनको पढ़ा देंगे. कई टीचरों को ये दिमाग में होता है कि मैं पहले दे दूंगा तो फिर क्या होगा, फिर ऐसा हो जाएगा, वैसा हो जाएगा. ठीक है भाई, बच्चों को पढ़ना पढ़ लेंगे, उसमें क्या बड़ी बात है. आई शुड आई गिव इट बिफोर हैंड, बिकॉज आई नो कि जब आप इसको ढंग से पढ़ के आओगे तो दैट इज व्हेन यू विल एक्चुअली अप्रिशिएट इट मोर. और मैं कोई बहुत अलग बात नहीं बताऊंगा, बट जस्ट आई एम गोइंग टू नरेट इट इन अ वेरी डिफरेंट फैशन. माय जॉब इज टू सिंप्लीफाई दीज थिंग्स. बाकी किताब में तो ये सब कुछ लिखा हुई है. My job is to relate all of these ideas. My job is to make it easy for you to understand the broad ideas, right? And like I have been telling you this from many of the previous classes, that the whole living world was divided into 2, animal kingdom and plant kingdom. अंदर क्या लिखा हुआ वो इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, उसके पीछे की कहानी क्या है. Just today I was teaching international relations class. और उसमें सो मैं पूछ रहा हूं कि क्लाइमेट चेंज नेगोशिएशंस की ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस है, वो क्या करती हैं एक्चुअल में. कोई कह रहा सर वो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड कम करती हैं, कोई कह रहा कार्बन सीक्वेस्ट्रेशन करने के लिए काम करती हैं, सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट लाने का काम करती है. भाई उन ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस पे एक्चुअली डिबेट होती है कि हाउ वी आर एग्जैक्टली गोइंग टू डू व्हाट, how we are going to reverse the climate change. And in this, when I'm asking this question in the context of international relations, it is about what? How the developed and the developing countries have a difference in their views. Why developing countries keep telling us this idea that they need to follow the common but differentiated responsibilities principle, CBDR principle. ये बात अगर आपने समझ ही नहीं आई तो आपका काम ही खत्म हो गया. बाकी तो सिर्फ फैक्चुअल नॉलेज है भाई. कितना टारगेट रखा, कितना पैसा डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज ने दिया, डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज ने क्या डिमांड किया, ये सब तो बस फैक्ट है. बट उसके पीछे का लॉजिक तो बताओ अपने को. लॉजिक ही नहीं पता अपने को, अब बस पढ़ रहे हैं अपन बैठ के. ठीक है. So if you see this thing, vertebrates are what? The ones who possess vertebrates. And if it is about humans, humans also are vertebrates. Why? Because they have vertebrates. Vertebral column है पूरा, spinal cord है उसके अंदर. Do you agree with this? Simply now, from this perspective, you go and see the taxonomy and it will start making sense to you, even if you are a non-biology student. इतनी बात समझनी है और हमें सिर्फ समझना है इंसान कैसे बना. टैक्सोनॉमी में इंसान की जगह कहां है, ये क्वेश्चन भी नहीं पूछता है, बट हमें पता होना चाहिए क्योंकि इसके आगे एप्लीकेशन है. Are you getting this? सब लोग, people online. Class Mammalia. Humans are mammals, right? Warm blood animals covered with fur, possessing mammary glands for nourishing their young ones after birth. They possess mammary glands through which they feed their young ones. ठीक है. Primates. Humans are primates. Why? Because a kind of mammal. We are a subtype of mammal. We are a subtype of mammal. We are not like any other mammal. We are mammals, but with certain special features. Right? What are those features? With a generalized anatomy. It has a meaning. A relatively larger brain. Grasping hands and feet. Grasping hands and feet. Grasping hands meaning we can grasp things. No other animal can do that. Dogs can't grasp things. They can only pick things from their mouth. You're not required to do that. Cows cannot do that. No other mammal can do that. Only those mammals, like humans and other primates, they can do this thing. कितनी बड़ी बात है. जैसे बाकी जानवरों में कईयों में क्लॉ होता है, पंजा होता है जिसको बोलते हैं. तो फिर कभी इंसान को राक्षस की तरह पोर्ट्रे करना होता पिक्चर में, उसके क्लॉ बना देते हैं, ही कैनाइन बना देते हैं. हॉरर मूवी विल नॉट बी हॉरर अगेन फॉर यू. आप लोग अरे elongated canine. Agree? So this is how they make it scary, by just adding these useless features. Actually, if you watch a horror movie without the music, it looks very funny. उसके पीछे की वो साउंड और आवाज ही तो आपको डराती है, बाकी होता क्या है उसमें. बाकी तो बहुत ही फनी लगती है वो देख के कि आंटी हवा में क्यों उड़ रही है इतना ज्यादा. ठीक है. So you see what? Primates, there are certain features. Although it is a very lesser number of features that have been highlighted, we are going to study primates in elaboration. Why? Because it is a group in which we find those animals which are actually very closely related to the modern humans and the human beings that we are today. So out of the whole of the living beings of the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, our interest lies in what? Studying this subpart. Our focus is on studying what? Only everything about the order primate. बस इससे ऊपर नहीं पढ़ना है हमने. Mammals के बारे में बहुत ज्यादा नहीं जानना है. Vertebrates के बारे में बहुत ज्यादा नहीं जानना है. Our focus is on studying everyone who is part of the order primate. And even in order primate, not everyone, only few people. But knowing order primate is important for us because it is going to help us in understanding the evidences of evolution. It will help us in understanding what? The evidence of the evolution. For example, the species of the past. Species of the past, how they're related to some of these living species which are there. Right? So for example, I've already told you the primates are there. If you look at anthropoidia, we can simply use the term. No need to be very specific and scientific. You can use the term anthropoids. And what are the features of anthropoids? They are social, daylight active primates. Right? Nocturnal and diurnal is a term you might have heard. Nocturnal are the ones who are awake in night. Humans, by biological design, by evolutionary process, are diurnal. और हमारे साथ वाले भी कई लोग नॉक्टर्नल हो जाते हैं, रात भर जगते हैं, सुबह 6-7 बजे सोते हैं. आर यू नॉक्टर्नल? नहीं. कॉलेज में तो सभी नॉक्टर्नल ही होते हैं. क्या अभी भी? हाँ, इवोल्यूशन हो गया है, डी इवोल्यूशन हो गया है. प्रोसीमियन बन गए हो तुम सब जो रात को जगते हो. ठीक है. देन hominid and hominin. What's the difference between these terms? We'll understand this thing. So humans are hominids. We are hominoids from Africa, genetically more closely related to chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas than to hominoids from Asia. Asia wale kaun hai? Orangutan. This is something that we are going to study later. And then we have Homo sapiens, certain features which are there. Homo sapiens broadly are which ones? So they have large brains, rely on cultural adaptation to survive. Ancestral fossils are placed in this genus and species depending upon the details of the skull shape and etc. Now see, one important thing that we got to understand is all of these individuals which have been categorized as a part of order primate in the taxonomy, all of these individuals which have been categorized as a part of what? The order primate in the taxonomy, these are living primates. कौन है ये? These are living primates. And like Darwin said, all the present living species have evolved from what? The previous existing species. So there might have been certain primates which have become extinct. There might have been certain primates which have become extinct. And we also got to study the primates which have become extinct, which is part of the paleontology. I was telling you the phylogeny, phylogenetic characteristics, fitting those into the evolutionary tree. Where do these fit in? Here. For example, genus Homo. Homo habilis is a part of what? Genus Homo. Homo erectus is also part of genus Homo, but they are not alive today. They are extinct. Yes or no? Most of them become extinct. ठीक बात है, समझ रहे हैं इस बात को? There are many such individuals which are extinct today. For example, we only know about the modern apes. There are only 3-4 types of modern apes. मतलब in great apes there are only 3 apes. In lesser apes there are a few more. So we know that there are apes called as chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, gibbons, siamangs, bonobos. ये सारे हमारे apes हो गए, ये living apes हैं. Anybody knows about the extinct apes? Extinct apes have been identified as Sivapithecus, Dryopithecus, Corathpithecus, Gigantopithecus. जैसा मैंने बोला ना, Ramapithecus is only Sivapithecus. Pithecus is basically what? Ape. Ape-like. And they belong to a different geological period. Abhi just know this thing. Oreopithecus, Corathpithecus. Ramapithecus Sivapithecus का एक वेरिएंट है. Got it? अभी जस्ट गेट इंट्रोड्यूस. अभी सब आएगा वापस से, वापस घूम फिर के अपन वहां पहुंच जाएंगे वापस. जब वो इनको डिटेल में पढ़ेंगे तो इफ यू आर इंट्रोड्यूस टू दिस आइडिया राइट नाउ, it will make sense better when you're going to study the next. ठीक है people online, I hope all of you. हाँ महिमा शांति, भी लोग परेशान हो जाएंगे नाम सुन के, सब लिख दिए उसने, प्रो कॉन्सुल और सब लिख दिए, पैरापिथेसिड और प्रोप्लायोपिथेसिड एंड बहुत सारे हैं ऐसे, ओमिमिड्स एंड एडापिड्स. अभी जब नाम आएंगे तो याद करने में मौत आएगी सबको. तो जितना धीरे जाएंगे उतना आराम से बैठेगा यहाँ पे. जैसे देखो वो कनस्तर के अंदर आटा भरते हैं ना जमा जमा के, वैसे जमा जमा के याद करना है, सब याद हो जाएगा. चिंता मत करो, इतनी बार मैं बोलूंगा कि तुम्हारा दिमाग खराब हो जाएगा, उठते पिटते तुम बात ही यही करोगे. सी मोस्ट ऑफ दिस नॉलेज इज सर्कुलर लूप. तो एक जगह शुरू करो फिर घूम फिर के वापस वहीं आ जाओगे. बट देयर हैज टू बी सम स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट, एंड व्हेन यू स्टार्ट इट साउंड्स अ बिट डिफिकल्ट. है पॉइंट? यस और नो? किस चीज को डर लग रहा है ऑनलाइन ये सब नाम सुन के? वो भी अपनी भावनाएं व्यक्त कर सकता है. अनुजा डरने की कोई बात नहीं, विल हैंडल इट. डरते तो हम ह्यूमंस बनते ही नहीं. बाकी सब चिल है या सो गए चावल खा गए? यस, क्यूरियोसिटी इज फाइन. ठीक है. So I hope this is clear to everyone. So what did we see first? The great thinkers. Then we saw what? Then we saw the creation theory, special creation. Then we saw Carl Linnaeus. 3 developments have happened. Now, there was another person whose name was Comte de Buffon. He wrote a work called as Historic Natural and was a contemporary of Carl Linnaeus, and he strongly suggested that life forms are not fixed. Life forms are not fixed. I already told you the debate is only between static and dynamism. Once you accept there is dynamism, you will ask the next question. What's the mechanism? Right? And he said what? Life forms have never been fixed, rather they have been changing, they have been transforming. Right or wrong? Then Rasmus Darwin, चार्ल्स डार्विन के दादाजी, उसके परिवार में सब इवोल्यूशन की बात कर रहे थे, तभी तो वो इवोल्यूशनिस्ट बना. 2 जनरेशन लगी पूरी थ्योरी बनने में, 3 है पॉइंट. Rasmus Darwin was actually Darwin's grandfather. What did he say? Suggested that there are evolutionary aspects of the animals and strongly contended that Earth and life on it must have been evolving for millions of years. तो डार्विन बेसिकली अपने दादाजी का सपना पूरा किया उसने, और कुछ नहीं किया. समझ रहे हो? तुम लोग भी अपने दादाजी का सपना पूरा करने आए हो शायद यूपीएससी, बट डार्विन एक्चुअली फुलफिल्ड हिज ग्रैंडफादर्स ड्रीम्स. So you already had this as a part of the family discussion. खानदान का नाम रोशन कर दिया डार्विन ने. Nice. Then we had Lamarck. Lamarck भाई को आइडिया लग गया था कि इवोल्यूशन होता है, बस समझा नहीं पाया ढंग से. Lamarck understood that there is something called as evolution, something called as change, but wrongly interpreted the mechanism. What was that? He was a French naturalist. He is termed as the first evolutionist who confidently put forward his ideas. क्योंकि उससे पहले इवोल्यूशन के बारे में बात करना ही मुश्किल था यूरोप के अंदर, बिकॉज टू क्वेश्चन बिब्लिकल आइडियाज इट वाज ब्लास्फेमी, not very well accepted in the society. About the process leading to the biological change, he opined that structure of a living being is dependent upon its function. क्या काम करता है उस हिसाब से. He used the example of giraffe, saying that it got the long neck for its constant use of reaching to higher foliage. मतलब पेड़ वाला part. Based on this observation, he pronounced two theories: use and disuse of characters, and the acquired characters are inherited. Inheritance of acquired characters is actually the name that is given to his theory. Lamarck's theory was not tenable among scientific community. It was not acceptable among scientific community as it raised a number of queries, and to establish it, more evidence was required. However, Lamarck's theory of evolution is an important milestone for the evolutionary biology. It's an important milestone. We need not deny his contribution. Why? Because he, for the first time, put the evolutionary theory forward more confidently. Right, guys, everyone? Then, like I told you, the extinct species tell us that things have not remained the same. Rather, they have changed and transformed. Changed and transformed. For example, George Cuvier, paleontology and catastrophism. What did Cuvier do? He devoted considerable effort to learning the anatomy and the structural makeup of many kinds of animals, pioneering what we call now as paleontology and comparative anatomy. Right? And I told you, if let's say you find during the excavation an extinct species, so only if you have studied the comparison of the related species in the contemporary world, you will be able to make a sense of the extinct species. Of course, he would have excavated or he would have found extinct species. Right? And he also had certain ideas. For example, by doing so, he reconstructed the physical characteristics of the past animals. How would they look like, their physiology, and how would they have behaved? So usually when you find fossils, you do not find the full animal. You don't find his full anatomy. कभी सिर्फ आपको सिर्फ jaw मिल गई है. On the basis of the jaw, you will have to actually extrapolate the information scientifically. It is actually going to tell you about what? Other features of that individual also. जैसे मैं simple example देता हूँ. Human skull fits on the top of what? The spinal cord or the vertebral column. And if you look at the skull of the ape, it is like this, forward projecting. So the hole that is there at the base of the skull, जहां पे fit हो रही है अंदर जाके, the hole that is there in the base of the skull, it is called as foramen magnum. क्या बोलते हैं इसको अपन? Foramen magnum. Right? The position of the foramen magnum in human skull is more forward. While in the apes it is far more backward. तो आपको स्कल मिला, आपने बोला फोरामन मैग्नम बीच में, आपने क्या ड्रॉ किया? बाइपेडलिज्म. You found a skull, looked at the position of the foramen magnum, and then you said, okay, maybe this might have had erect posture, and that is why it might have walked bipedally. Online people, I hope this is making sense. हर एक बात को बहुत केयरफुली सुनना इस बार. ठीक है? Is it making sense? ठीक है? So you find fossils and then you ascertain what would have been its behavior. Right? So if you see, let's say for example, you see the human anatomy. So we have a thigh bone which is called a femur. What is it called? Femur. Our femur has a head which fits into the pelvic girdle. This is your pelvic area. In this pelvic area, the femur gets fixed. Just by looking at the shape of the femur, you can say if this animal was bipedal or quadrupedal. Because you have knowledge of the whole anatomy on the basis of the comparison that you have done. And actually, only few fossils have been found of certain species. For example, one of the human species called as Homo heidelbergensis has been interpreted on the basis of only a jaw, which is called as mower jaw. Okay? So fossil study is a very important part. These efforts provided early tools for understanding the past life forms as once living organisms or the ones which have become extinct today. Cuvier demonstrated that fossils found in the geological strata in France were the remains of the animals that had gone extinct at some point of time in the remote past. तब ये बात समझाना बहुत मुश्किल था कि ये क्या है. Because he studied it scientifically, he had knowledge of anatomy. On the basis of that knowledge, he extrapolated this idea that these are extinct species. ये किसी आज के इंसान की नहीं है. और अगर ये डीप जमा हुआ है तो हो सकता है कि ये बहुत पहले दब के मर गए हो, ये स्पीशीज खत्म हो गई. ये बात कितनी रिवोल्यूशनरी होगी जब इसने बोली होगी. आज तो नॉर्मल है हमारे लिए. आज हमारे लिए रिवोल्यूशनरी है कि कोई आके बोल दे कि भाई मार्स के ऊपर इंसान एक और स्पीशीज रहती है, तो हमें लगेगा वाह गजब बात है. फिर 4-5 जनरेशन निकलेगी, वो कहेंगे इनको ये बात पता नहीं थी कि मार्स पे होती है स्पीशीज. हाँ, ठीक है. Cuvier observed that each stratum seemed to contain a unique set of fossils. Cuvier's works provided the first basic understanding of history of life from the earliest forms to recent ones. He concluded that they must have gone extinct due to some powerful catastrophes. उसको लगा earthquake आया तो हो सकता है उससे मर जाते होंगे, or maybe because of volcanic eruptions. Then he further hypothesized and surmised that following each catastrophe, the region was vacant of all the life and was subsequently repopulated by a different group of organisms, moving into it from elsewhere. This perspective is called as what? Catastrophism. But he failed to realize that this is only one way in which the species can go extinct. Chai ka time. He found what? He found that it is later it was understood that it is only one way in which the species can be extinct. Species can also go extinct because of the change in the climate. Only later we found the true mechanism, but at least his contribution is great in this. We know that the Earth's history does not consist of sequential catastrophes and resulting extinctions. Past catastrophes such as the extinction of dinosaurs 65 million years have profoundly affected the direction of the evolution. However, such events are rare and do not explain even the sequences of fossils Cuvier observed. Right? This was the fossil that he studied. Other possibilities explore नहीं करी उसने, लेकिन इतना सोच पाए यही बड़ी बात थी तब. See, even Darwin gave the whole theory of natural selection, gave the whole idea about the origin of the species, but could not explain inheritance. Darwin failed to explain inheritance. Only later with Mendelian ideas we understood that how inheritance happens. डार्विन इतना ज्ञानी बनता था लेकिन वो इनहेरिटेंस नहीं बता पाया कैसे होता है. उसको लगता था कि ट्रेड्स होती है फादर की मदर की और वो ब्लेंड हो जाती है, इसलिए बच्चों में एकदम मिक्स लिखता है आपको. Fail to recognize that actually the traits are passed on by discrete units which do not actually blend. They manifest in the physical form in the form of combinations depending upon recessive or dominant traits of them. है? अगर ब्लेंडिंग हो रही होती, मान लेते हैं, तो टुडे वी नो दैट द 23rd chromosome decides your gender. 23rd chromosome decides your gender, in which one chromosome is provided by mother, one is provided by father, and you are a male because Y chromosome was provided by your father. Yes or no? X और Y होता है, XX होता है. तो अगर X प्रोवाइड किया होता फादर ने, तो आप XX बन जाते, क्योंकि मदर इनएविटेबली इज ऑलवेज गोइंग टू गिव यू X. फादर ने दिया Y, और अगर डार्विन के हिसाब से ब्लेंडिंग हो रही होती तो आप X और Y मिक्स होके कुछ और निकलते. समझ रहे हो बात को? X एंड Y का ब्लेंडिंग हो जाती, उसका तो ब्लेंडिंग इनहेरिटेंस था. राइट गाइस? तो हर बार फिर आदमी थोड़ी बनता, फिर मिक्स हो जाता, कुछ और बन जाता. इट वाज रॉन्ग. So only later we found that inheritance happens in a very different fashion, not the way in which Darwin understood it. He accepted that the traits are inherited. How? He didn't know. He explained that there are variations. He didn't know how they come up, because he didn't know the mechanism of inheritance. Huh? ठीक है? So you see this now? One of the Cuvier's most important contribution to the science was the concept of extinction. In his 1796 paper on fossil and living elephants, Cuvier suggested that mammoth remains represented a species different from any living elephant species, and therefore the mammoth remains were from a species that had gone extinct. शुरू में उनको लगता था ये elephant की लग रही सारी. The idea was revolutionary because the common perception was that God has created all species and none of them can ever go what? Extinct. भगवान ने बनाया, extinct कैसे जा सकती है? भगवान ही पैदा करता है, भगवान ही मारता है, तू ही बनाए तू ही बिगाड़े. Right or wrong? अब ये कौन सी पीनात बता देगी अपन को? इसकी बस का नहीं है इतना बताना. Name of the book is written Essential of Physical Anthropology, Larson's. Actually, anthropology requires a lot of imagination also. अगर आप इमेजिन नहीं कर पा रहे हो तो फिर समझ नहीं पाओगे. ठीक है? And you need to be okay with some of the unexplained things also. Right, wrong? ठीक है? Now, uniformitarianism. James Hutton had highlighted about uniformitarianism. What does it say? According to a literal interpretation of Bible, Earth is only a few thousand years old and its surface is static. सब static की बात कर रहे थे, change की कोई बात ही नहीं कर रहा था. Scottish era scientist James Hutton became dissatisfied with the biblical interpretation of the planet's history. He inferred from his observations that these forces changed the Earth's surface in the past, just as they do in the present. Wind and rain created erosions, which provided the raw materials, sand, rock, and soil for the formation of new land surfaces. Over a time, these surfaces became stacked one on the top of the other, forming layers or strata of geological deposits. Right? Just for example, when you study geography, there are mostly two processes that are happening. Broadly, if you look at the surface of the earth, there are two processes that are happening. One is the uplifting of the land. Uplifting hoti land ki through maybe earthquakes or some activity, which is basically mountain building activity. So you will see what? Uplifting of the land happening. And then there are forces of denudation. क्या बोलते हैं इनको? Forces of denudation. What happens to denudation? शुरू में आपका ये पार्ट निकलेगा, यहां जमा होने लगेगा, right? फिर ये पार्ट आपका निकलेगा. Eventually find what? This landscape which had mountains and valleys would look like this after a period of time. You will not find sharp valleys then. होता है? And how does denudation happen? Wind, water, all of these are what forces? Erode करेंगी, sediments को निकाल के कहीं ना कहीं जाकर deposit कर देगी, like the process that is happening right now in the Great Indian Plains. Himalayas are getting denuded at every point of time. Weathering actually provides what? Weathering is a result of physical stresses, but weathered material is then transported or shifted from that place to some other place. है ना? Why do we see so many landslides? Because of the force of water. होता है? Is it or not? And we see the rivers from the Himalayas, they bring a lot of sediments and they are getting deposited in the northern Indian plains. पढ़ा होगा geography में यही सब landforms पढ़ते हैं भाई. And some of the old mountains of the past, they were what? They were tall at one point of time. Because of the denudation, they have come down. कभी कभी बीच में अर्थ वापस से अपलिफ्ट हो जाती है तो फिर से नया फीचर बन जाता है. जैसे आपने पढ़ा होगा, एक होता है मियंडर, एक होता है एंट्रेंच मियंडर, इनसाइज मियंडर. पढ़ा है किसी ने? एनसीईआरटी खोली कभी कि पहले मियंडरिंग हो रही है तो एकदम से अर्थ अपलिफ्ट हो जाए तो एंट्रेंच मियंडर बन जाता है. देखना जाके. ऑप्शनल बहुत पढ़े ना मैंने, ज्योग्राफी भी ऑप्शनल था मेरा एक टाइम पे, पर जीएस में भी पढ़ते हैं इतना. ठीक है. So what you see is, if you see the process of how the land surface is transforming, actually these are the forces that are leading to what? Transformation of the surface of the land. Endogenous and exogenous forces ये तो करती है. इसी की वजह से आपका लैंड अपलिफ्ट होता है, फिर वो वापस से the moment the land is uplifted, फिर denudation process शुरू हो जाता है. And eventually we found that it is a result of plate tectonics. The land gets uplifted or subducted, and then the process of erosion actually keeps on transforming. Wind का भी erosion होता है, wind का भी abrasion होता है. This is most of the times when you'll go to deserts, you'll find certain standalone stones which have been undercut by the wind. Mushroom rocks जो होते हैं, ऐसा लगा जैसे ऊपर लाके किसी ने बॉल रख दी ऊपर. तो wind and water, these are two forces through which things keep on happening here. उसके बाद डिपेंड भी करता है कि स्टोन का मटेरियल कैसा, रॉक का. सॉफ्ट होगा तो बहुत जल्दी डेन्यूड हो जाएगा, हार्ड होगा तो थोड़ा मुश्किल होगा. पोरस है और वो बहुत सारे जो अपन पढ़ते हैं ज्योग्राफी में पूरा आप पढ़ते ही होंगे. तो दिस वाज एक्चुअली एन आइडिया दैट वाज प्रोवाइडेड बाय व्हाट? जेम्स हटन. And what did he say? That forces that change the Earth's surface in the past just as they do in the present. Matlab, what did he establish? He established that Himalayas have not always been there, or Alps have not always been there. होता है? And you look at our myths and stories of the religion. कैलाश पर्वत, फिर वहां से पानी. Religion has its way of understanding things. Science has its way of understanding things. मानोगे इस बात को? आ रही कुछ, आ नहीं समझ में? दुनियादारी आ रही थोड़ी बहुत समझ में? People online? ठीक है. Then Hutton's idea that natural processes operating today are the same as natural processes that happened in the past is called as uniformitarianism. Few paid much attention to Hutton's important contribution to our understanding of Earth's history until rediscovery of his idea by another geologist who is called as what? Charles Lyell. What did Charles Lyell say? He was actually an English lawyer and a geologist. तो पहले आप सोचो, सबसे इंटेलिजेंट लोग यूपीएससी वाले ही लगते हैं मेरे को. क्यों? ग्रेजुएशन किसी और में करते हैं, काम कुछ और कर लेते हैं. यही काम बड़े बड़े लोगों ने किया एंथ्रोपोलॉजी में और बाकी फील्ड्स में भी. मेलिनोव्स्की मैथमेटिशियन था, वहां से घूमते घूमते एंथ्रोपोलॉजिस्ट बन गया और ग्रेट एंथ्रोपोलॉजिस्ट बन गया. ये भाई साहब लॉयर थे, जियोलॉजिस्ट बन गए. फ्रांस वॉज एक्चुअली ज्योग्राफी का स्टूडेंट था, वो एंथ्रोपोलॉजी में फादर ऑफ एंथ्रोपोलॉजी बन गया अमेरिका में. ठीक है. So he disapproved the Cuvier's catastrophism theory. In his 3-volume book, Principle of Geology, he documented the fact that the Earth must be considerably old, pehla, and natural processes through time, like erosion, earthquakes, and glacial movements and volcanoes have actually changed the shape of the Earth and its living units. He provided conclusive evidence for the theory of uniformitarianism, the theory that processes that occurred in the geologic past are still at work today. He explained this by saying that present would be the key to understanding the past. He argued that natural changes were the same in the past and the present. So basically what we are doing, we are trying to reverse engineer and understand things from the past. We are doing reverse engineering. कि ये जो आज ऐसा है, ये ऐसा क्यों है, पहले क्या था? And it is a scientific attempt to understand the past of the mankind. Right or wrong? Then comes our Malthus. Malthus बहुत सीधा आदमी था. उसको सरकार ने काम दिया कि तुम बताओ कि हम रिसोर्सेज कैसे बढ़ाएं. उसने रिसोर्सेज नहीं बढ़ सकते, वो धीरे धीरे बढ़ेगी. तो बोला पॉपुलेशन, बोला अपने आप घट जाएगी. जितना रिसोर्स उतनी पॉपुलेशन बचेगी. क्या करना है, परेशान क्यों होना है? Right? So after returning to England while developing his ideas on natural selection, Darwin read the work of all the great scientists of the time. Probably the most important influence on his ideas was the essay on principle of population by English political economist Thomas Malthus. पूरा नाम है रॉबर्ट थॉमस माल्थस. एक पहले बैच में मैंने बोला रॉबर्ट माल्थस, फिर लोगों ने बोला सर थॉमस माल्थस है. मुझे लगा नाम तो मेरे को ध्यान था, ये क्या हुआ. फिर मैंने सर्च कर पता लगा रॉबर्ट थॉमस माल्थस या थॉमस रॉबर्ट माल्थस, ऐसा कुछ. दो नाम है, मतलब पापा का नाम भी होगा. First published in 1798, Malthus's book made the case that an abundance of food, enough to feed anyone born, would allow human population to increase geometrically and indefinitely. अगर खाना लगातार बढ़ता रहा तो पॉपुलेशन कभी रुकेगी नहीं, बढ़ती चली जाएगी. लेकिन खाना तो लगातार बढ़ नहीं सकता, उसकी लिमिट है. कितना बढ़ जाएगा है? In reality, the essay argued that there is simply not enough food for everyone born. So population is limited by the food supply. जितना खाना होगा उतने लोग बचेंगे लास्ट में. होता है इंडिया में, खाना आया बहुत सारा, एकदम से पॉपुलेशन एक्सप्लोजन हो गया. मस्त खाना खा के रिप्रोड्यूस करो. वही तो कह रहे हैं. भारतीय समाज जो सेक्स को लेकर इतना कम डिस्कशन करता है, 140 करोड़ लोग इस देश में, इतना टैबू टॉपिक है. हमारे देश को तो बात करनी ही नहीं चाहिए ऐसी है. और जो जनरेशन बात कर रही है उनके 8-8 भाई बहन हैं पिछली जनरेशन से. सारी प्रॉपर्टी का नुकसान करा दिया है. नहीं है बाकी इतना स्ट्रगल ही क्या होता है. प्रोटेस्ट जीरो, क्या प्रॉस्पेरिटी होती सोचो इंडिया में. है नहीं. हाँ, माय फादर, there are 7 siblings, 2 brothers, 5 sisters. ठीक है, एंड मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल इन योर प्रीवियस जनरेशन माइट हैव हैड सच थिंग. अभी इसको नैरेटिव बना देगा ओनली पीपल ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर रिलीजन हैव दिस प्रॉब्लम. इट इज अ प्रॉब्लम दैट हैज बीन देयर इन इंडिया. हाउ डिड यू बिकम सच अ ह्यूज पॉपुलेशन? हम तो 3 ही हैं. पेरेंट्स की जनरेशन वाज 7. माय ग्रैंडफादर हिमसेल्फ वाज, दे हैड 5 brothers and 3 sisters, 8. इसमें उनको गिल्ट देने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है ऐसी. पहले एक्चुअली प्रॉब्लम यह थी कि वो कॉन्शियसली बच्चे पैदा करने का डिसीजन लेते नहीं थे. पहली बात तो ये. दूसरा, उनको लगता था कि जब हो रहा है तो पैदा करना ही है. उसमें से कई बार बहुत ज्यादा जिंदा भी नहीं बचते थे, तो अपने आप नेचुरली बैलेंस हो जाता था. बहुत ज्यादा मेडिकल फैसिलिटीज थी नहीं, इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज डिलीवरी थी नहीं. तो किसी बच्चे को एक डायरिया हुआ और वो 3 साल की उम्र में मर गया. एवरी पेरेंट हु हैड दीज द जनरेशन बिफोर दैट, यू जस्ट आस्क देम एंड दे विल से कि हाँ 2 तो बच्चे उसमें मर गए थे, फिर एक कॉलरा में मर गए थे, फिर एक इसमें मर गए थे. वो सिंपल फिनोमेना था. ठीक है, दिस वाज लाइक अ वेरी नॉर्मल नोशन. दे हैड देयर ओन सेट ऑफ प्रॉब्लम्स एंड दे टुक डिसीजंस ऑन दैट बेसिस. उनको क्या पता था कि ये कहानी आगे जाके बन जाएगी. हाँ, वो डेथ होती थी पहले, नॉर्मल था. इट वाज वेरी नॉर्मल. दैट इज व्हाई दे यूज्ड टू रिप्रोड्यूस मोर. मतलब आई टेल यू कि आज तो सोच के भी आप लोगों को थोड़ा अजीब लगेगा, बट सास और बहू के साथ में बच्चा हो रहा होता था. समझ पा रहे हो? सास और बहू के साथ में बच्चा पैदा हो रहा है. बहुत नॉर्मल था इंडियन सोसाइटी में पहले, कोई बहुत बड़ी बात नहीं थी. क्यों? क्योंकि सास की शादी हो गई थी 17 साल में, 16 साल में. जब तक उनका 7वां बच्चा हो रहा था तब तक उनके बड़े बेटे की भी शादी हो गई थी. माई फादर इज एल्डर टू हिज रियल अंकल. मतलब वॉज एल्डर, ही इज नो मोर. तो माई फादर वॉज एल्डर टू हिज रियल अंकल. उनके अंकल उनसे छोटे हैं 2 साल, 3 साल. है. और अब सिनेरियो उल्टा होता जा रहा है कि बच्चा पैदा हो रहा है पहला 40-45. राइट और रॉन्ग? See, so it was part of the society. It was like everywhere. ठीक है. So population has its own set of theories. Population की theories आपके पेपर 2 में भी आती है, demographic theories. Mostly आपकी geography से related ही, बहुत ज्यादा बदलता नहीं. There is Marxist theory, there is Malthusian theory, and then there are theory of demographic transition. वही करके आता है. आप ह्यूमन ज्योग्राफी में पढ़ते हो 11th के एनसीईआरटी में. ठीक है, people online, I hope it is making some sense. So what did he say? There is simply not enough food. उसने बोला अगर फूड सप्लाई अबंडेंट कर दोगे तो बच्चे पैदा होते चले जाएंगे. But because food is limited, only such population would survive. So who survives reproductive age? Those who can successfully compete for food. Those who can successfully compete for food. Whose children would thrive? Those of survivors who manage to feed their offsprings. Right? Applying the Malthus's demographic ideas to human and non-human animals, Darwin concluded that some members of any species successfully compete for food. एक species में एक ही set of लोग, not necessarily every member of the species would be able to successfully compete. कर पाएंगे क्या? Which will be able to successfully compete for food? Which ones? सही. The one who have adaptive traits. The one who possess the traits which will help them in getting the food, surviving till reproductive age, and producing viable offsprings. होता है. कुत्तों में माँ अपने बच्चों को मार देती है कई बार, बहुत ज्यादा होते हैं तो. ठीक है। एक और चीज आप सोचो कि इंसान भी मैमल है, डॉग इज ऑल्सो मैमल, दे प्रोड्यूस लिटर, 6 बच्चे पैदा करते हैं, इंसान 1 या 2 करता है। इट इज ऑल्सो एन एडेप्टिव स्ट्रेटजी, जस्ट थिंक अबाउट इट, आगे बात करेंगे इस पर। वन ऑफ द डिफरेंसेस इन प्राइमेट्स एंड अदर एनिमल्स। ठीक है। So what did he say? Out of all the members of the species, only those individuals which possess the adaptive traits will be able to do what? Get food, survive till reproductive age, produce viable offspring. And I told you these are the 3 goals of any species. Those who are not able to do this thing will not survive. जो नहीं कर पा रहे उनका नहीं हो पाएगा भाई। ठीक है। And that an individual characteristic could facilitate survival was a revolution. And what is this individual characteristic? It is basically trait. And traits vary in a population. Individuals in a population have what? Variation in the traits, out of which some traits are helpful in a particular environment or a habitat. Some are not helpful. The ones that are not helpful, maladaptive. The ones that are helpful, adaptive. Over generations, the frequency of the adaptive traits would increase, maladaptive would decrease, eventually leading to the event of speciation. And then there is Lamarck's theory. Anyways, we'll come to Lamarck's theory, but let's first summarize what we have studied here. क्या हो गया, लेट हो रहा? क्या बोलो, मेरे को बता दो। ठीक है। फर्स्ट जेम्स हटन, यूनिफॉर्मिटेरियनिज्म, राइट। चार्ल्स लायर, provided the fossils or organisms remain. George Cuvier extensively studied fossils, revealed much variation in the fossil record, then pioneered taxonomy based on physical appearance. Eventually, Carl Linnaeus is the one who mastered this idea. What did Thomas Malthus do? Founded demography. Only some will find enough food to survive. Provided the concept of characteristics advantageous for survival. Lamarck, characteristics acquired via inheritance, right? And eventually, Rasmus Darwin is there. और फिर आ गए हमारे मिस्टर डार्विन। ठीक है। आई होप दिस इज क्लियर। ऑल ऑफ दीज थियरीज आर कॉल्ड एज व्हाट? प्री डार्विनियन थियरीज। क्या बोलते हैं इनको अपन? प्री डार्विनियन थियरीज। सो ब्रॉडली देयर आर 3 टाइप्स ऑफ थियरीज दैट वी स्टडी। वन इज प्री डार्विनियन, सेकंड इज डार्विनियन, एंड थर्ड इज सिंथेटिक थियरीज, व्हिच इज नियो डार्विनिज्म। प्री डार्विनियन, डार्विनियन and neo-Darwinian or synthetic theory. Synthetic meaning they are a product of synthesis of multiple ideas along with Darwin's ideas primarily. Yes, no? People online? ठीक है guys? पोस्ट डार्विनियन मोस्टली आप मान लो कि डार्विन ने जब दे दी अपनी थियरी तो डार्विन को इनहेरिटेंस का मैकेनिज्म पता ही नहीं था। सो मेंडल्स आइडिया इज द पोस्ट डार्विनियन आइडिया। ऑल ऑफ द नॉलेज ऑफ द जेनेटिक्स इज पोस्ट डार्विनियन। फ्रॉम इट इमर्ज अ फील्ड कॉल्ड एज पॉपुलेशन जेनेटिक्स। वी कैन स्टडी जेनेटिक्स एट एन इंडिविजुअल लेवल, राइट? बट वी ऑल्सो गॉट टू स्टडी हाउ जीन्स वेरी अक्रॉस अ पॉपुलेशन. इट इज पॉपुलेशन जेनेटिक्स. थ्रू दिस वी स्टडी समथिंग कॉल्ड एज जेनेटिक ड्रिफ्ट, जीन फ्लो. ये सब पॉपुलेशन जेनेटिक्स का पार्ट है, राइट? द थिंग दैट वी स्टडी, जिसके अंदर वी सी द इंडिविजुअल, इट इज कॉल्ड ह्यूमन जेनेटिक्स. फॉर एग्जांपल, व्हाट आर क्रोमोसोमल एब्रेशंस, क्रोमोसोमल एरर्स, राइट? हाउ डू द जीन्स मैनिफेस्ट इन द फेनोटाइप, इन द फिजिकल ट्रेट्स? है नहीं है? फॉर एग्जांपल, देयर इज सेंट्रल डॉगमा ऑफ जेनेटिक्स कि one gene reflects in one trait, but this is not how things work actually. A lot of research has been done and now we have better understanding of that. And every day things are getting evolved in this direction. ठीक है. सो जस्ट नो देयर इज डार्विनियन, देयर इज प्री डार्विनियन, ऑल ऑफ दीज आर प्री डार्विनियन. तो हमें क्या करना है एग्जाम में? प्री डार्विनियन पे अगर क्वेश्चन आएगा डिस्कस द प्री डार्विनियन एंड डार्विनियन थियरीज. तो हमें इनके मेन आइडिया और नाम, बस इतना ही काम करना है. उनको एक्सप्लेन नहीं करने लग जाना एग्जाम में. व्हाट वी गॉट टू डू, द नेम्स ऑफ दीज इंपॉर्टेंट इंडिविजुअल्स, सारे नाम याद करने की जरूरत भी नहीं, इंपॉर्टेंट जितने, चार्ल्स लायल जैसे हो गया, जॉर्ज क्यूवियर हो गया, क्योंकि वो इंपॉर्टेंट है. रैसमस डार्विन का नाम हम बता सकते हैं. ठीक है. यूज देम एंड देयर आइडिया. एंड व्हाट इज द एसेंस ये है कि हमें हाईलाइट करना है कि एक्चुअली दीज डेवलपमेंट्स मेड अस बिलीव व्हाट, दैट अर्थ एंड लाइफ फॉर्म्स हैव नेवर बीन स्टैटिक. ये बात भूल जाओगे, मुझे पता, सब लोग सब नाम याद करने में बिजी हो जाओगे. एंड लमार्क ऑब्वियसली. What this challenge is, it challenged the idea of special creation. Years are important to highlight the chronological development. Yes or no? I hope things are clear, people online. ठीक है गाइस, तो मिलते हैं फिर मंडे को, जब भी नेक्स्ट क्लास है. ठीक है. आई होप ऑल ऑफ योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग.
StudyIQ